Hello everybody, my name is Jeff and we're at Pure Yoga Talk in Austin, Texas for today. I'm happy and excited to have Marie Belle, and she is new to the Central Texas area, moved into Georgetown from Washington, D.C. just a few months ago. So Marie Belle, I am so happy, so honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much.
And so tell us about this new journey, venture into Central Texas from D.C.
Oh, thank you. I just decided to move to Texas on a whim. Last year was a very difficult year for me. Numerology, we could call it a number 9, which is a year of endings and a lot of things just shifting. And I couldn't quite understand what was happening. And then what was really happening now, fast forward, is I was being gradually disentangled from different worlds so I could start over. So now I'm in a year 1, whereas like everything's new, whether it's a new job, a new location, new friendships, everything is new. And I remember in November, I was cleaning my house and there was a lot of stuff going on in my neighborhood that was making me feel not safe. And I was cleaning my house and I was like, you know, I'm good, I don't have debt, I'm single, I like my job, I can do this anywhere. I think I'm gonna sell my house. And let's just see what happens. And I thought I'd have a few months to figure it out because usually that's what happens with real estate, it doesn't sell right away. And I looked at the map and I was like, I wanna live somewhere sunny, athletic, where people hold their own and speak their mind, and then do the work. And I speak Spanish, so I also wanted to be within a Spanish-speaking area or close to warm cultures. And so I looked at Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, Florida, and Pennsylvania. And as I was doing that, I wrote to different studios everywhere, and Austin just responded within 20 minutes. Yeah. Different studios in Austin were like, yeah, we can book you. And so then I booked workshops for February and March. And then I put my place up on the market in December because it took a little bit to sign contracts, and it sold in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, okay, it was Christmas and I was in Guatemala, and the person paid me extra in cash to move out by a certain date. So when I returned to home, I had 10 days to pack.
Nice.
And I didn't have anywhere to go. And so I just put all of my stuff in a pod, and when they asked me where to keep it, I was like, let's just see Austin, maybe?
Yeah.
We'll just keep it in Austin. And then when I came and I taught in February, I loved it. The people were very receptive, very kind. The yoga community is strong and open to cross-pollination, whether with fitness or nutrition or other disciplines of yoga. So I just loved it right away, and I feel like a plant that has been repotted, where it was just like I felt that I had already hit a ceiling in DC, and I'm ready to expand maybe in width as well. So my aperture is shifting while being here.
That's amazing. And we're lucky that you're
Oh,
here.
thank you. I'm really grateful to be here.
Cool. And in DC, you have a PhD in psychology and psychology, and you're a psychology and sociology professor at George Washington. That's pretty prestigious. You're an Ashtanga yogi training, and you had studios there, you taught there. So you had a yoga life, you had a professional life, and now a lot of these things are coming together into Marie Belle. And so tell us who you are and what you do today, how you bring it all together.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have my PhD in psychology, and so for a long time, if we were to zoom out, I'm a teacher. I'm a student, I'm critical, I love critical thinking, and one of my assets is pattern recognition and being able to see how things connect. And so for a long time, it was psychology professor and then teaching yoga. Those were 2 separate worlds. And then gradually, as I've been maturing, I've started kind of allowing it to coalesce or merge, and I feel there's a much more integrated movement happening. A quick word to summarize it would be embodiment. So this invitation for us to land in the body and land into felt awareness. If we look at language, for example, our first language as human beings is movement. It's not words. And so I'm moving into this practice of a deeper genius or a deeper intelligence that's beyond the intellect, beyond language, through the body, whether it's yoga or calisthenics or handstands or any of that.
pretty cool. Yeah, you're a handstand junkie, right?
Yeah,
you're an athlete. People who see you on Instagram and social media, they can attest to that, and we can attest to that for sure. There's a really great quote, and you've been quoted, if you want to teach somewhere, you have to practice there. Right? That's something that's a truth to you. And there was another great one, if anyone were ever to question my teaching ability, or where my authority to teach comes from, they should watch me practice. So you are somebody who absolutely leads by example.
Thank you.
Right. That's and I think that's a great lesson for any teacher out there, whether they are an academic or a yoga or fitness teacher, right? So tell me then, there's more than Ashtanga. So your yoga asana training goes well beyond Ashtanga. Can you give us a little bit more?
Yeah, so when I first started practice, it was while I was in graduate school in Virginia Tech, and it was following the school shootings that happened at Virginia Tech. And so I experienced a lot of symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder while I was getting my master's and my PhD in psychology. So the cool thing about that is that my mentor was like, you need to talk to someone. And I didn't want to talk to anyone, plus I was in the psychology world, so it would have been my cohort, you know? So there was like these interesting things going on. And then she recommended mindfulness-based stress reduction. And because I didn't have to talk to anyone. With mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's more about landing in the present and being with what arises, with non-judgmental compassion. And it didn't really work for me until like halfway through. I started shifting. And I started shifting when we did yoga or mindful movement, which was we were to be barefooted on a grassy field and feel what part of our foot touches the grass first. What does the grass feel like? How does our skin respond to that? How did my breath change now that I'm aware of the of grass? And so it started from a mindful movement perspective. And so the beautiful thing with what happened at Virginia Tech is immediately following those events, everything was free. Free yoga, free therapy, free alcohol, free tattoos. It went all over, good and, well, there's no good and bad, but all over the spectrum of extremes. And so I started doing free yoga at the gym. And I was lucky that one of the days I went to practice, I fell in love with the teacher. Like, I just knew right away she was going to be my best friend. I just really liked her vibe. I liked where she spoke from. And she was like, you should do Ashtanga yoga teacher training with me. And I didn't know anything about any style of yoga. I didn't know anything. But I looked it up, and it said Ashtanga is one of the oldest and traditions or like documented lineages. And so I did it, and it was 1 week and a month for 9 months, and their whole currency, which you mentioned earlier, the whole thing I was taught is to have a practice. And on weekend 1, we were taught sun salutations. Go home, practice. And then after a month, if you have your practice, I will teach you sun salutation B. Go home, practice. After you do that, if you've been doing that every day, I'll teach you standing. And so it was just like this really kind, gentle, slow, methodical process. Yeah. And by then I was in love with the practice, and I had been having a very difficult time being with myself. And this practice was helping me be with myself in silence. And so something within me was just like, you can't stop. Like, you have to dive head first. And so I just kept practicing. And the beautiful thing, if you keep practicing, is you start maybe possibly getting injured or having like discomfort here or questions there. And I was lucky that I have friends who practice other things. And so I kept hurting my shoulder practicing Ashtanga. So my sister introduced me to her Anusara teacher, and Anusara comes from Iyengar. And it was much more alignment-based and biomechanics. Yeah. And it was a beautiful teacher who I also loved. So all of a sudden I was learning Ashtanga, Anusara. Anusara has Tantra non-dualist philosophy, so I started learning that. And in the process, a hot yoga studio opened up in Blacksburg, and they're like, we want you to teach here, but it has to be in our lineage. Huh. And I said, well, I don't have that. And they're like, let's barter. You teach for us for this set amount of time, and we'll pay for your training. And so all of a sudden I was doing Ashtanga, Anusara, hot yoga, wow. And I haven't even talked about all the other ones like Dharma, Rocket. Nidra, Yin, So basically, another way, I just dove headfirst to practices that worked for me. And so that's the thing for me is I see all of this as medicine for different times of my life, or different aspects of what I'm going through, or different parts of me, like the child, the intellectual, the one who needs structure, the one who doesn't want any structure. And so for me, it's a practice of getting to know the self.
Yeah, and so because you've taken such deep dives into all of these different systems, plus your psychology and sociology background, it kind of makes you the perfect person to create these mindfulness practices that where we join body and mind together. And tell us about some of those programs that you have.
Oh,
today.
Thank you. Thank you. It took me a really long time to feel I had the authority or the worthiness to do that, because again, in a lot of these lineages, there's already someone at the top. And that some traditions like Ashtanga is like, no, you send your students to us. And who are you? There's already someone alive who knows more than you. You send them to us. So it took me a long time to disentangle from that worthiness piece that I had to work with. And so I really appreciate you saying that, because you're meeting me now, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there was a lot of shame or like a lot of questioning as to who am I to teach this. And so I was teaching it the way I was taught. But recently, within the last 5 years, since lockdown basically, I've been like, actually I have something to say. And the way I teach is different, and now it's consciously different, and I'm not ashamed of that. And what it is, again, is embodiment, is landing into your experience, what comes up. And so in yoga tradition, we talk about the koshas, the different sheets or layers of the body. So what I'm doing is helping people experience the different layers, and through that they can step into that inner genius that doesn't have words, or that inner genius that is beyond the intellect. So if I were to talk about the koshas for a moment, they're like the manomaya kosha, the anamaya kosha, that within that there's the word maya, illusion. So maybe when we begin practicing, whether it's Ashtanga or Dharma, we're working with the body. Inhale, step the right foot forward, hands up, look up. Something like very physical. And you can work with the physical. And as you work with the physical, you can start piercing through the illusion of limitation of the body, maybe. And then we step into the emotional or the energetic or the visual. So all of this to say that what I'm sharing is a deep integration beyond the language. And so it's more about felt, sense, knowing.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. I don't know.
It does.
Okay,
and
okay.
it's interesting, we can hit play and you can just go, and you can go on and on, right? Because you have a lot in your quiver, right?
Yeah. My mentor was like, your caboodle is stocked.
It's stocked, yeah.
Yeah, because I like going down the rabbit hole of different things, whether it's yoga, nutrition, psychology. And this is, I think, something that really attracted me to you all, that I really appreciated how you all also have gone down the rabbit hole of different things that right now it might seem a little bit off, like not off, but a little bit, not taboo, niched.
Yes.
But give it 2-3 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be the norm.
Yeah.
And so it's just diving deep, and then at some point it just so happens your roots are deeper and you know more. So yeah.
That's it. Yeah, just keep searching, studying, learning, and you grow. We all grow. So going back to your history, right? Back in DC in 2010, you go and do a certification, or you do a week long with Manju Joyce, and then you come back, and then you have a real life-changing event, right? So you quit your job, and then soon after that you go up to Harvard Medical School, and most people say, wow, I go to Harvard Medical School and I have a postdoc opportunity there, and you turn that down. So what happened there?
Yeah, so as I was completing my PhD and I was still living in Virginia Tech in 2010, I was writing postdocs. And I wrote a postdoc for Harvard, hoping that the way I've lived my whole life is, it's a given I'm supposed to get a high school degree. And then once I get my high school degree, it's a given I'm going to get my college degree. And once that, it's a given I'm going to get a doctorate. And then after a doctorate, there's a postdoc. So I like hierarchy and climbing, or that's how my family raised me. It's like you go to the top as far as you can. So a postdoc was a natural continuation of my education. And so I was just writing grants and writing postdocs, and I didn't hear back. I graduate in May. I didn't hear back, so I took a job in August, and I had to move to DC. And while in DC, I hated my job. It was a corporate job. I didn't like it. And all these things happened, and I quit. The week that I quit my corporate job, Harvard Medical School was like, hey, you've been accepted as a postdoc because of the grant I wrote. We need you to move here in January. And immediately I was like, this is a dream come true. Of course I want to get, like, Harvard, are you kidding me? Like, yes, and it's something I wrote, so you know I loved it. Yeah. So my PhD is on parents' beliefs about emotions, how that affects the way they talk about emotions, how that affects the way they talk to their children about emotions, and how children understand emotions. So my postdoc was all of that with culture, was all of that, but yoga. How yoga affects the way we think about our emotions, the way we talk about our emotions, and the way we understand each other. So I was understanding yoga as shifting fundamentally our emotional intelligence, or our understanding of ourselves through our language and through our connections. And that's what my postdoc at Harvard would have been. And I was interested in studying it long term. So offering yoga to preschoolers, to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, and track them those 15 years or however many years. And my hypothesis is that those children would have greater senses of security, of safety, of creativity, and fewer risky behaviors when in adolescence, whether sexual or substance abuse, and higher levels of college or continuing education. Yeah. So I already had all of this planned out. And so when I went to the interview, I knew I was going to say yes. But during the interview, a lot of weird stuff was happening that I couldn't look away. And I got warned by several people in the staff that there was a reason this was available, and most people who are getting their postdoc in the field I was doing it are technically getting their postdoc for 10 years. And a postdoc should only take a couple. So basically it's like being underpaid without the guarantee that you're gonna get the degree you signed up to get.
I see.
So there was a lot of other stuff, and so I ended up being like, you know what? I'm already living the life I want. So I was teaching at GW and I was teaching yoga, and I had all of this time to practice, all of this time to connect with people who care. Why would I drop all of that for to move in 2 weeks somewhere that was going to underpay me, couldn't guarantee that I would get my degree? And by the way, in the contract it said that my name wouldn't be on anything I wrote.
Wow.
It would just say Harvard Medical Staff, and it would probably be under the department head.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of things that I was like, actually, like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And I'm at a place where I can turn it down. And of course, like, my dad is the main one who's like, you go for it. You get that degree and you can always say you went to Harvard. But he also saw me suffer through the corporate job, and he was like, Marie, you just got out of that. It might not make sense for you to get back into it. Of being underpaid, overworked, and underappreciated. And so, yeah, I decided to stick with college teaching and yoga, and life has been lovely since, and it just took off.
Wow. And that's great to have your dad, your family behind you. Right? Big, big deal to support that. Otherwise, you live a whole life of expectations, or you've been drilled into. You say, oh, you must do this, now you do this. You keep climbing that ladder, and that just seemed like the next step. Yeah. But obviously, your intuition guided you elsewhere differently.
Yeah, and I had really good mentors throughout, and I had mentors who were like, you're going through a rite of passage. And I was like, what do you mean? And they explained to me that everyone goes through these initiations where there comes a choice where the life that you're supposed to live versus the life you know you want, which is different than what you've been trained to think. And of course you could choose either way. But if you choose against your heart, chances are that like the previous decision, like, comes up every 5 or 10 years, and it becomes harder and harder the further ingrained you are into living the life you're not supposed to. Yeah. And so what they said is you can make the decision you want now, but in 10 years, looking back, it's gonna be like, man, I could have just chosen with my heart 10 years ago, because your heart knows better. And so for me, you're right, my family was supportive, and that changed everything, and my mentors were supportive. They didn't make it easy, but I knew that they validated my experience, and they're like, you are doing really well, and I haven't seen you this happy, you know? And so, because my life radically shifted when I started getting into the yoga community. Yeah. People love their lives and are intentionally doing the work. Why would I take myself out of that? So yeah, I was very lucky to have the support and the mentorship of my people.
That's great.
Yeah.
So your yoga experience, your asana experience goes from Ashtanga, and like you said, it included Anusara, hot yoga, Dharma Mitra, all of those, right?
Yeah.
And Rocket. Rocket is a nice extension from the Ashtanga system.
Yeah.
And that probably led you into a little bit more of the idea of integration, right? A lot of integration. So where you are now, like what styles of classes do you teach today?
Well, when I moved to Texas, I wanted to make sure I'm not carrying the banner of tradition for any one lineage. So I do not represent this one teacher. I don't represent that other teacher. With that being said, when I'm teaching, to answer your question in 2 words, I'm teaching mindful mobility or mindful movement. Now, if the class is called Dharma Yoga, obviously it's from the tradition of Dharma Mitra with my understanding as well. Okay. So right now in Texas, different studios want me to teach a particular lineage. So if you want me to teach Dharma, I teach Dharma with my understanding. If you want me to teach Ashtanga, I teach Ashtanga with my understanding. And so what that means is I teach much more approachable Ashtanga. Some people get lost in the Ashtanga rules and indoctrination, and you must do it this way. I try to be softer about that. And so if one is supposed to look like this in a pose, I don't teach you're supposed to look like this. I teach bring your foot here, how does that feel? Does that feel okay? Cool, what if you do this? What if you do that? And so it's a little bit more invitational than dogmatic. The classes that I teach without labels are just called practice. Yeah. Practice 60 minutes, practice 90 minutes, nice. And whoever shows up lets me know what they are working on. The general template is sun salutations, standing, seated, and closing. And movement is connected to breath.
Got it. Pretty straightforward,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But straightforward, but because you are so disciplined and you've studied so many lineages that you can incorporate it, and it's Marie Belle, right? And it's the class, it's the people in front of you.
Yeah, and I think of them as family members is another image that's coming through. So Ashtanga might be my grandfather, Dharma might be my grandmother, and they all carry their own wisdom. And sometimes they disagree with each other. Yeah. And still being on the outside lets me see where they're coming from, and being on the inside lets me know where they're coming from. So I'm able to bring in what I need to as I'm teaching.
Yeah. Now I know you're an athlete. I know you. I mean, you do. Tell me what other things do you like to do? What are activities, movement activities?
Currently, right now, I'm on a mission to get my strict ring muscle up, and so that would be more within CrossFit or gymnastic strength training. But I don't CrossFit, and I don't I've never taken a CrossFit class, but I'm working on that. Another way to say it is calisthenics. I do calisthenics. I am strength training about 4 to 5 times a week, and I hand balance. If I'm being honest about the yoga practice, as far along as I got in Ashtanga, it's contortion. Yeah. And so I did start consciously training contortion and active flexibility. Okay. So calisthenics, contortion, active flexibility, strength training.
Yeah. You got it all.
And ring work.
And ring work. So there's like medicine 3.0, the whole movement today with longevity, health span, and all that. And there's a big focus and emphasis on strength, strength training for people who are getting older like me. And it's important, strength, joint health, bone density, and range of motion. And I feel like in the longevity world, there's not as much conversation about range of motion, mobility, and stability. And I think that is something that can be brought more fully into the conversation. But strength, joint health, those are big ones. And I think there's a general avoidance of the longevity movement, longevity world for yoga. They don't really accept that yoga can be part of that equation. Do you sense that yourself?
Do you mean within the yoga world, people don't see it that way, or outside of the yoga world?
Outside of the yoga world, in the fitness world today. As an athlete, you do a lot of different things. I do a lot of different things. But in the current tidal wave of longevity and health span and medicine 3.0, all of that conversation, yoga is really never brought up as a possibility.
Huh.
Yeah. I've never heard it brought up.
Oh, okay. No, for me, I did, and that's how I got into it from psychology as well, because it was just like that was part of the movement medicine or mindfulness in your body. Again, I'm coming from psychology. That was my original piece. So psychology was intellectualizing a lot or putting words to concepts. And what I liked about yoga was that it was bringing the body into it, and now I'm trying to make sense of what's going on in the body. So for me, I saw one as more upward moving, and yoga for me was more grounding. I feel like most of the things I've heard for longevity and recovery, yoga has been taught more from a recovery perspective. So yoga, breath work, cold plunge, sauna, I feel like they all get put within the same world.
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I think that yoga has more possibilities. I think yoga or derivatives of yoga practice, right? Traditional yoga practices can have more application in that whole sphere.
For sure. Definitely, yeah.
Marie, tell me about Roots Love Yoga.
So Roots Love Yoga is my school, and I see it as a multidisciplinary project where I get to create curriculums and intensives and workshops to really talk about things that matter under the guise of yoga. So I do 200-hour teacher trainings, I lead 300-hour teacher trainings, and then I also have continuing education. Some of the continuing education is practice-based, like handstands, flexibility, backbending. Others are more about teaching and cueing, languaging, how to sequence your classes, how to create curriculums. And others are more lifestyle and how to, like, we might even talk about God and like why we're even practicing or what it all means. And some of it could be energetic, the chakras or astrology or breath work. So it's just a way for me to create spaces to educate and share. Not one way, like I'm sharing everything, but then people who connect throughout the students, they also have something to share and add to it. So, and I called it Roots Love Yoga because I love roots, like whether it's roots music, roots like getting deep into the earth, so deep that you understand from a whole different perspective. And before we were recording, I was sharing that if we look at the trees outside, they all look like they're separate. Same with lineages. Maybe Ashtanga looks separate from Iyengar, looks separate from Bikram, but if you really get to the heart of it, they're just helping us feel good in our bodies and land in the present moment. And in the process, maybe you suffer and you experience discomfort, but the roots of it, what is the main connector of it all? It's all the same, in just different flavors.
Wonderful. And coincidentally, we're sitting here in what we call our Treehouse yoga studio, where we learn to connect to the roots of our yoga, and we learn to build and grow and also have fun. So you're going to be here in this fall at Pure Yoga, Texas, and tell us what we have in store.
Yeah, so thank you for setting that up. We have a weekend of Ashtanga. There'll be classical Ashtanga. There's also the off-roading, which is kind of how I practice now, which is it's like when you travel with a local versus a tour guide. And so there'll be the option to do both. There'll be the classical, this is what you need to do, this is what it looks like. And then the next day is like, this, you could turn right over here, or technically you could explore here. And so there's different ways of working with the body and working with the lineage that could help one reestablish their practice or grow their practice or fall in love with the practice. So there'll be Ashtanga, there'll be some inversions and hand balancing, arm balancing. And that's in September.
Awesome. So we look forward to having you there.
Yeah.
And anybody can find where you are at any time on mariebellepr.com. Right? That's where you'll list all of the classes where you will be in Austin, so they can catch a class with you at multiple places. That's awesome. All right, Mariebelle, thank you for sharing your time with us at Pure Yoga Texas on Pure Yoga Talk.
Thank you. That was lovely.
All right.
Thank you.